Hello, guys, and welcome back to Flow States. You are joined by myself, Luke, and my wonderful co-host, as always, Adam Smith. And guys, we're back with episode 8 today. And as promised in the last episode, we have got a number of you to send questions in, and we're going to spend the whole episode today just going over your listener questions. And yes, we normally go over a few niceties. And as always, we do want to thank you for all the love you've given the podcast so far. But instead of recapping our weeks, we do want to get into as many of these questions as possible because, look, we did get quite a few in the end. So we are going to dive right in. And look, Adam, I'll let you take us away. Where do you want to start?
Cool. Yep. Good to speak to you again, Luke, and looking forward to a slightly different episode this week. Not just talking about our training and everything else. So instead, we're going to, answer some questions that have come in, and we're very grateful for some of the questions. So yeah, like you say, mate, I'm just going to dive straight in and I'm going to ping a question your way if you don't mind.
Please. No, I'm ready.
Cool. So Run Colo Run from Instagram, who is Jamie Collins from Lurgan here where I live, has asked me, and by the way, I'm just going to quote the person's Insta name. And if I know that guy or girl, I'm going to mention their name as well. I'll try my best. So Jimmy says, is there a best way to carb load pre-race? Great question.
That is a wonderful question. And again, I'm not kind of amazingly versed in the research around this, but my short answer is no, there isn't a single best way to carb load around a race, because what we do know from the research is that everyone responds kind of differently to carb loading. Like some people, it's very, very effective. Other people, less so. But look, as a general rule of thumb, and I'm sure Adam will attest to this as well, the longer the race, so I'm thinking specifically, obviously ultra marathons are a given, but we're talking marathons and half marathons, you'd probably want to stock up. By stock up, I mean eat a little bit more than you normally would in terms of your a mix of faster digesting and slower digesting carbs, because essentially we have glycogen stores in both the muscles and the liver. And when you're running, you will obviously be taking on gels as you go. That's your fast absorbing sugars that's going straight in your mouth and into the muscles. That's great. But to kind of back that up, you want to have those glycogen stores as kind of topped up as possible. So what I'd suggest is that like for the bare minimum day before, you're kind of going a little bit harder on things like maybe your oats for breakfast. You might have some rice for lunch and dinner, or pasta, whatever sits well with you, because again, that's really important. You are going to be eating maybe a little bit more of these foods than you normally would. So just kind of working out what works best for you in terms of those carb sources, and yeah, just getting as topped up as you can. What I will say is, if you're someone that likes specific numbers, so like wanting to know how many grams of carbs per kilo of body weight, that kind of thing, I would suggest heading over to Jonah Rosner's Instagram page. Fantastic. I think he's an exercise physiologist, but he has really delved into some of the research on these figures, and he'll be able to, or at least in some of his posts, he'll be able to give you a better idea of what exactly, or how much exactly of each macronutrient you want to be having, because obviously as carbs go up, you also want fats and protein to come down, so you've got more room for that and don't have any of that GI distress. But long story short, and thanks for the question, really good one, is no, there's no best way, but as a general rule of thumb, you probably want to be paying more attention to increasing your carbs for at least the 24 hours prior. Maybe even for a marathon, you might even go 48 hours, especially if you're maybe a little bit leaner.
Yep. Perfect answer, Luke. I would agree with that. I just say really high carbohydrate, really low fiber, low protein, low fat. That's the general set of principles. In terms of grams per kilo of body weight, you want to aim for somewhere between 7 to 10. And again, that will vary from person to person and how comfortable you are with carb loading, and that should then be practiced in training. So I like to go to the upper end of that scale. And aim for around, again, I don't weigh it or measure it anymore, but I kind of know, 7 to 10 grams per kilo of body weight. The other thing that I would say is, if you just eat carbs all day and nothing else, like if you're just eating rice, oats, honey, jam, bagels, and you're eating foods that literally have zero fat or zero protein, it can be quite difficult to get full. you know, and yes, you want to have a very low amount of fiber, fat, and protein in the diet because, like you mentioned, you want to kind of spend your calorie budget for that day on carbohydrates because you want to keep that glycogen tank absolutely filled to the brim. Um, I would always include just a little bit. Just again, it's a bit more satiating, and you kind of feel you're a bit more satisfied. But lots of people kind of think to themselves, "Oh, carb load, it's a great day of eating." It's probably my least favorite day of eating. I'm a massive foodie, and yeah, you're just not having the usual flavors and foods that you have. But again, experiment with what works for you. I would always trial a carb load at least once in a training block. So if, for example, your marathon is on a Sunday, sorry, a few weeks out when you're doing one of your last big long runs on a Sunday, trial that carb load on a Saturday. And then, like you said, come race weekend, you might want to split your carb load up over a couple of days. So,
Yeah.
the last thing that I just want to mention on that is start your carb load from when you get up in the morning. Don't wait until like the pizza or the pasta the night before. Begin carb loading from the minute you wake up and don't leave it really, really late because you don't want to feel like you're absolutely going to explode. And if you struggle with eating enough carbohydrates, drink some. Do you know? I like to use the Morton 320 drink mix. There's 80 grams of carbs in that alone, and I'll just sip on that throughout the day as well as having my other bits and pieces. And sorry, one more thing is I have found personally that too much sugar the day before can sometimes lead to, well, I think it's linked. I've kind of found this link myself, and again, it could just be a coincidence, but it's happened a few times. When I've eaten too much sugar or lots of sugar during the carb load, I've found that I'm prone to stitch. So I need to use sort of more rice, more oats, more pasta, more potatoes, as opposed to more and more sugar. I'll still top up with bits and pieces, like my Happy Hippos or my Henry Hippos from Lidl, but yeah, not too much. Otherwise, I tend to stitch. So hopefully that answers that question.
Very well said.
Cool. Ready for the next one, or do you want to
I'm
go?
ready. Now
Cool.
let's go. Send us another.
Perfect. Jules Hughes says, "Do you have a pre-run or post-run stretch routine? And if so, what does it consist of?"
Yes, I did see this question, and very, very good question. It's something that I get quite a lot as a personal trainer, even for resistance training. And again, the research around this is pretty clear that static stretching, at least, is pretty ineffective. And if anything, can actually do some damage because what you're getting is essentially more of an eccentric load, and then isometric load when you're obviously think about doing a quad stretch, for instance, you're pulling your leg back. If you're just standing there holding that for 20 seconds, what you're actually doing is creating very small micro tears in the muscle. Yes, it's tiny, it's not very much, but that's not really going to do much in terms of getting you ready for your run. So like a general rule of thumb, unless you've been used to doing some kind of static stretching for a long time, and that's what you're now kind of acclimated towards, I wouldn't introduce any static stretching. That said, if you want like a warm-up routine, all you need to do is look up the ramp acronym, RAMP. That's a really good way to break down your warm-up. It's basically just a form of kind of preparing. I think it's like R stands for raise, so you're raising your core temperature. You may be doing some light walking, maybe even a very small shuffle. A is, man, I should know this off the top of my head. Adam might be able to jump.
Activate,
Activate,
is it?
correct. So that's,
I think.
yep. Yeah, no, that's the one. So that's where you're getting the muscles ready. You might do some kind of some walking stretches where you're not really holding it for too long. You're just kind of you might do step and do knees to chest or kind of those quad stretches, but as you're walking, a bit more dynamic. M is mobilize, so that's where you're kind of getting the joints working through the joint action. You might be doing just some lunges. You might do some sides, lateral lunges, that kind of thing, just to get you the joints nice and warm, the connective tissues ready. And P is potentiate. That's where you might do specifically for kind of sessions where it's a bit more dynamic. You might do a couple of short efforts, sprints, strides, whatever you want to call them, not 100%, but maybe kind of ramping up from 60, 70, 80% to get your nervous system fired up. And that might also be things like plyometrics as well for some people. So yeah, the ramp protocol is my go-to.
Yeah, cool. I probably don't stretch as much as I should. um, yeah, I like to run, I like to eat, and I like to sleep. But stretch
That's
is probably
called,
something I should do.
I think that's called raw dogging, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, mate. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I do a little bit. I like to sort of pre and post run, particularly post run. I do a little series of sort of active drills, not after every run, but after certain runs where I just feel that there's a little bit more tightness in the body. I always kind of use the analogy that when you run or when you kind of do any sort of training, you're tightening up the body. You know, you're tightening that screw into the piece of wood or the wall, and you got to do some work to kind of loosen that screw out. Otherwise, eventually something will crack. So when I feel like things are getting a bit tighter, I do like to do a series of drills that I actually shared with my coaching group this week as a little bit of a video. That just consists of some active kind of stretching as well as I said, a series of kind of drills to just make me feel more limber. The other thing that I do very regularly, when I'm sort of not pre or post run, but just like if I'm watching TV in the evening or something, is a thing called hope on a rope. So it's an active it's basically called active isolated stretching, and this hope on a rope set of stretches was developed by an unbelievable physio that I'm sure lots of people have heard of called Jared Hartman, and he was from Limerick in Ireland. Sorry, he is from Limerick in Ireland. Excuse me. And he worked with many of the best athletes in the world, including he was Paula Radcliffe's physio. Um, Sonia O'Sullivan's as well, I believe, and just like the gold medalists and the Olympians that this guy has worked with is unbelievable. But he was ahead of his time. He still is ahead of his time, and he developed a great routine called Hope on a Rope, which an old coach of mine actually shared with me. And essentially, it's when you go to see a physical therapist, lots of them will do um, what we call active isolated stretching with their client. This is basically you utilizing a rope to do the same type of stretching on yourself. So it's a fantastic routine, and I would recommend anyone to go check out Hope on a Rope by Jared Hartman. If you Google it, you can find it. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Some of the positions and stretches can be a little bit tricky to find, but you'll really start to see like your weaknesses, and it's a great way to work on them. So I would recommend that. And as I say, I also see my guy Ivan once a week for massage. He would always do a little bit of active stretching with me as well, at the end of the massage. And as I say, that just keeps the body right. But yeah, I should probably stretch more than I do.
There you go. So hopefully that answers those questions. Now I'm gonna send one to you, Adam.
Go on.
This is from Ryan Bell 06, and that question is 4 days running enough to continue progressing if swapping 2 easy runs for bikes? So I think what Ryan means by this is basically for someone, obviously a lot of us do maybe 5, 6, even 7 runs a week. I think the first part of the question is 4 days going to be enough of running? And then maybe you can read into this, if swapping 2 easy runs for bikes. So does that mean maybe dropping down to 2 runs and then 2 bike sessions potentially?
Yeah, we'll take it as that. Um, the answer to that is yes. I believe it is. And again, lots of these questions, like I'm the guy that answers every question with "it depends,"
It depends, bro.
because
Always.
it's that's how it is. Everything needs more context and everything needs like individualization. But we want to do our best to kind of give some helpful information on these. The answer is yes. If you increase the stress or change the stimulus over time and apply progressive overload to those 2 runs, you can absolutely progress. There may come a time where you might struggle to progress because volume becomes the kind of factor that's going to limit you, and then exercise intensity can only go so high, and there's only going to be so much benefit to increasing the exercise intensity. And you might also be limited by your time budget on those days. For example, you can't go out and run for 3 hours on both of those 2 days because you've got work, family, and other commitments. So it depends. But the answer is yes. I believe you can continue to progress, Ran. Um, that won't apply to absolutely everyone,
Mhm.
but I do feel like most people could continue to progress, but there's probably a more optimal way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I just again, I won't delve too much deeper into this. I feel like Adam summed it up really nicely. But the only thing I'd say is if you're doing 4 days of running and you swap out those easy runs for the bike, because we have spoken about the bike a couple of times, it is going to take away a lot of that specificity. So yes, you're going to do fine at making sure you're aerobically fit. And again, it depends what exactly you're doing on the bike. Um, but yeah, that's the only thing to be cautious of is like losing some of that time on feet to then go and cycle, because then you might find that you go and try a longer run after having done less miles, and it's because the bike doesn't necessarily relate 100% to running. You might actually find it harder. So in some ways you're going to progress, in some ways you're probably not. So I'd be mindful of that. I think if anything, the bike is probably a good way to get additional volume for your aerobic fitness, without putting additional stress on the joints, on the musculoskeletal system.
Yeah. Good
All
stuff.
right. Adam, do you mind if I send another one your way?
Go on.
Let's do it. So I'm not exactly sure who sent this one. Maybe you will know, but as a
I think this
newbie to the
was
yeah,
sorry, look, I think this was someone named Paul that appeared in my
Paul.
WhatsApp. So I've just added this
Yes.
question to our list.
That's right. Okay, Paul. Hello, mate. How are you? Newbie to the marathon. What advice would you have for his first? And he's someone that's hoping to break 4 hours. I think instead of going off in a tangent, why don't we do because again, I won't answer this. I've not run a marathon. So for you, maybe what is your number one tip, or maybe top two tips for someone who's a newbie to the marathon?
Run long. Get used to running long and build that strength needed to run long. I think lots of people don't realize how tough a marathon can get in the final miles, and that's when you really need to have that specific strength. And what I would say is if you're used to it, definitely include hills, because I think we talked about this last week. The strength that they build is just unbelievable, but you are a newbie, so you want to be careful with that. Um, and the second thing is relax a little bit about your time goal. You know, you may be capable of running much faster. And similarly, if you run 4:02 or 4:03 and it's your first marathon and you get a great experience, that's better than running 3:59 and having, maybe it's not better, but for me it is better, because you want to come back to this sport and continue to progress, as opposed to getting an absolute sickener because you've destroyed yourself to run 3:59:59. So my advice, and you've stressed about it during the whole block, you've been running through the whole block with that time in your head. So I would say run long, run hills if you're used to it and if you feel comfortable with it. And secondly, don't think too much about the time. Just think about going out there, enjoying the marathon, and having an absolutely great experience, because the marathon distance, yeah, it's beautiful. That's the way I want to describe it. It's a beautiful distance, and I want you to enjoy it and come back to it, because that's how you'll progress more over time. So forget about the 4 hours and think about running to your potential later down the line.
Yeah, finish with a smile on your face. That's all that matters, really. All right. Again, maybe I guess we can both take the next one. If you don't
Do you mind if
mind.
I do
Oh,
you
go
mind if
on.
I give you this question, because
Oh,
I
please.
actually spoke. Yeah, so I'll just give you a bit of background here. Um, Paul McCormick, physiotherapist from Lurgan, legend of a physiotherapist here from where I'm from, really experienced guy. Um, asked me about a client of his a young guy who basically, when they finish a race, and I don't have much experience of this. I have heard of this happen in some elites, but not anyone that I have coached. And I wanted to put this to you, Luke, because you might have some experience or some information here. But Paul asked me during the week about a client of his that when they cross the finish line, they basically just throw up. Every single time they have to step to the side and vomit. Basically, it doesn't appear to be nutrition related. It could be something to do with the stomach or the gut, but basically the nutrition seems spot on. I did ask the question about, what is the timing and the type of food like pre-race, and it seems to be in line with guidance, and it seems to follow a good set of principles. So yeah, I wanted to put that one to you, mate.
Um, yeah, so the first thing that comes into my head is adrenaline. I'd probably have to ask the question, is this someone who's getting really like amped up about the race itself? And again, I'm not necessarily saying these are rhetorical questions, so to speak, but if this is someone, let's say, who's getting really nervous, really anxious, and is then running the race, basically they're just adrenaline is going to be through the roof. And it could be like a psychological reaction whereby as soon as they finish, the body's like, oh, finally I can release, and then that kind of dip or that just sudden change in hormones can result in throwing up is very possible. I know a lot of people get that kind of adrenaline response. Like if you're, weirdly enough, if you've ever had like a piercing, like a lip piercing or a nose piercing, something that is really quite painful, or even a tattoo, right? You're getting really hyped up about it, and it ultimately it's something that isn't very kind of it happens very quickly, but as soon as it's done, a lot of people go, oh, I feel a bit faint or a bit dizzy, or they start to throw up. It could be that kind of response. So I'd maybe look into doing some kind of mindfulness practice, or even seeing a psychologist about kind of learning to control some of that anxiety, or it's called arousal. We call it arousal in the fitness game. So looking into controlling that. The other main possibility, and this happens with a lot of lifters, is when you're exercising, all the blood is leaving your stomach because you've left to your kind of rest and digest mode, and is going to your periphery, or your heart, basically to keep you moving as quickly as possible. And you could just be someone that has a very sensitive stomach. So even though you're fueling correctly, having the right things, because all of that blood has left the stomach, you just might be someone that is having a hard time digesting anything. And yeah, as soon as you finish, you've kind of whatever how this response is happening, and yeah, the body's like going, okay, I can't hold this in anymore. The adrenaline's gone. Like I said, all comes back to adrenaline, and you're chucking up. But ultimately, I don't have an answer. We're kind of just
No, I think your
throwing stuff.
answer, I think that's a really good answer, mate. It's definitely a great suggestion and a great sort of talking point. My answer was that maybe he'll grow out of it.
Yeah, give it a couple of
He's
years, you'll be fine.
he's a really young guy, and it could just be that he's still developing as a as a person, as a human being, and
Yeah, yeah.
it could be something that eventually he just grows out of. Because I don't know. I don't know why that is. I'd said it would be worth speaking to a nutritionist just to really tick that box. But I
Just
like
to
your answer
interject,
around the kind of adrenaline and the hormones, and there being potentially like a dump of some description where it's causing that response.
this has just brought something to my attention. I don't know if you've listened to, I'm sure you have, but Steve Magnus's book, Do Hard Things. He was actually talking about a scenario where a similar thing happened. This coach had an athlete that was consistently vomiting after every single session. And I think the way they got around it is the coach went to this athlete and said, okay, so you're vomiting after every race. Don't worry about it. What we'll do is I'll come grab you as soon as you finish the race, and we'll go find somewhere to vomit. You're allowed to vomit. It's going to happen. So we'll just let it happen. And they trialed this in race mode, and he's like, okay, you finished the race. Let's go find somewhere to vomit. And then the person found that they didn't have to vomit anymore. So it was almost a psychological response, like to being like, oh, vomit isn't good. I can't stop it. Therefore, I'm stuck. So maybe just go, okay, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. As soon as I finish the race, I'm going to make sure I've got like somewhere to go, and I'll just go and vomit, and then I'll enjoy the aftermath of the race. So maybe try that. That might help with the psychological side of things.
Yeah, there's got to be some research out there. I did a very quick Google search, and I've already seen a paper named "Exercise Induced Vomiting," so definitely worth reading into it and going down that path. But yeah, it's really common actually among middle distance runners when they do really hard track session in their specific phase for training, or sorry, for in their specific phase for racing. So, typically like maybe a 400-meter runner or an 800-meter runner, or even a 1500-meter runner, if they're doing some really hard interval repetitions. I've seen lots of those athletes vomit basically at the side of the track. It's really common, but I guess that's due to the intensity of the exercise. And at the end of a race, the exercise intensity could be high. It just depends what way you've managed your race. So yeah, it's one of those things to definitely look into. And if it persists, it could definitely be worth getting a medical professional's advice.
For sure, for sure. Now, can I ask you a question? You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Warb, Warbart, spelt
That's
W-A.
Wallace McKay.
Oh, there you go. Wallace. Hello, mate. How are you?
Wallace McKay.
So Wallace is asking, what speeds do you need to run to benefit from a carbon shoot? And might I add, that's a fantastic question.
It is. And um, I spoke to Stephen from Armagh Sports and Trophies about this recently on social media. He dropped me a comment on a video. I mentioned comfort and stability in shoes. It was one of those little shorts that I put up from our conversations. And I was talking about how you should look for comfort and stability, and how if comfort and stability cannot be found, it may be worth looking to a super shoe, or sorry, a non-carbon plated shoe, or even like a carbon plated trainer that is a little bit more stable. But Stephen commented on that video to mention that, yeah, basically slower runners is the term that he used, won't benefit from a carbon plated shoe. And I did ask, what does slower mean? And I didn't get an answer, unfortunately, on that. So, I don't know what defines slow. How slow is slow? And to be honest, I don't know the answer to this. I honestly don't. I don't know what speed you have to run to get the benefits from a carbon plated shoe. I've always, since they came out, I've worn them and felt like I've got the benefits. So yeah, I'm not too sure, but I know there is a massive school of thought and lots of people that don't feel like they get the benefits. And again, to give you an example, my good friend Ivan, the masseuse, he's kind of in that quarrel at the minute where he's unsure whether the carbon plated shoe is going to be the shoe for him in the marathon due to that comfort aspect, and he's considering wearing something like the Asics Super Blast because he is just much more comfortable in it and feels like there's more stability in it. And particularly when he gets to the back end of the marathon, 21 miles, he's seeking that comfort as opposed to something that feels terrible on his feet, because yeah, he just feels better in that shoe. So I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that around the actual specific speed, or if there's any research around the speed that you need to run. But yeah, that's a great question that unfortunately I don't know the specific answer to.
Yeah, I don't have a number either. And ultimately, I think it's something me and Adam will maybe have to look into and then get back to you. But my only thought, and I'll just leave this briefly, is that I think it's probably related more so to things like cadence. Because if you're someone who's just happens to be like very small, for instance, someone who's 5 foot, your leg turner is going to be turnover, sorry, is going to be so quick that you're probably going to benefit from carbon shoes when you're closer to what is a sprint for that sized person, if that makes sense. Because like ultimately you can't really put a pace on it, because a pace is going to be different for everyone as to how fast that is, right? So again, it's the word speed is so subjective. So I think maybe there's something to be said for that, like how quickly you're turning over the legs. But I think that's definitely something that I'll have to look into.
I would assume it's got something, again, using my engineering and physics brain, the carbon technology, whether it's carbon plate, carbon rods, or whichever the shoe manufacturer is using. I assume there needs to be a minimum force placed upon that piece of material in order for it to give you energy return. And I'm sure there's a sliding scale here where there's, a certain amount of force is optimal, and then similarly beyond that force, it goes the other way. You start to go towards that plastic, where a material fails to still function in the same way, and it actually risks breaking, which is what we call the kind of plastic. It's towards that plastic side of the scale. I'm wording this really badly, but yeah, there could also be then a minimum threshold at which that force has to exceed in order to get the benefit from that piece of material, be it carbon plate
Yeah.
or carbon rods. So I would assume it's around force production, and there's a window of forces whereby too little isn't going to get any benefit from that piece of carbon. And then there's a section where you get lots of benefit from the carbon when you're putting a certain amount of force through it. And then similarly, you go beyond that force and the carbon potentially could break or could fracture, as we sort of say in engineering. So yeah, there's I would assume it's got something to do with the force production and whatnot. You know, my advice would be, again, get in to see someone that's an expert in a shoe store, get them on your feet, get a run on them in a treadmill if you can, and you'll know right away if you're getting the benefit from that shoe. You really will. You like it will feel amazing on your feet and amazing when
Yeah.
you run if you do. And don't just jog on it, you know. I mean, the other thing that I should just mention very quickly is there are times when I have done my warm up in carbon plated shoes and been running very, very, very slow. And I have been getting the benefit of that shoe. And when I say very slow, of course, that's subjective. You know, that's very slow to me, which could be anywhere from 9 minutes per mile, 6 minutes per K, down to 440, 430 per K. But I definitely get the benefit of the carbon plate at those speeds because my perception of effort is significantly lower than it would be in a jogging shoe, and my heart rate is significantly lower than it would be in a jogging shoe. I always say like a warm up in carbon plated shoes is free. It's like
Yeah.
you're not running at all. Like last week
It's
when we
3
did
miles.
it's free mileage, you know, and that's why you shouldn't wear a carbon plate for your easy jogging. But what I was just going to say is, and I know quite a few people actually that do wear a carbon plated shoe for easy mileage a lot. And again, that's probably a conversation for another day. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's free mileage. You know, I definitely get the benefits of the carbon plated shoe when I'm running at those speeds. Again, that's me personally. It may not apply to you, so it's definitely worth getting that shoe on your foot, trying it on, and looking for an alternative if it just doesn't work for you. Because there are don't be disheartened. There are so many alternatives out there. There are also carbon plated training shoes, and sorry, carbon plated trainers like the Asics Superblast. Sorry, I don't even know if they have a carbon plate in them,
No
but
play.
The Saucony Kinvara Pro is a shoe that looks like a jogging shoe. It looks like a really comfortable mileage day shoe, but it actually has a carbon plate in it, so that's a great option. And Stephen actually highlighted that shoe to me. Stephen from Armagh Sports and Trophies, he highlighted that shoe to me as a great option for people that don't necessarily respond to the race shoe because it has a very aggressive geometry, but that could benefit still from the technology, and there's more comfort. So that's a shoe that I'm actually down to try because yeah, I could just imagine clicking off some really big hilly long runs in that shoe and just having a lot of fun.
Mm. There you go. Hopefully, I know we didn't exactly answer it, but hopefully that does as good a job as Wallace was expected.
Yeah.
Just to let's
Should we just answer every question is just I don't know.
yeah, basically
No, I'm
unsure.
joking.
Sorry.
No, I'm joking.
Um, Look,
I'm joking.
we'll brush past the next one because this was also from Wallace, and that was just best running shoe for your average Joe. And yeah, do you want to just cap this one off really quick?
Yeah, there is no answer to that. Simple as that. It's yeah, go try some shoes on in a shop, get fitted, and figure it out because unfortunately there is no answer for that one. The answer is there is none. Yeah.
All right. Should we scroll on to the next page? Start from the
Sounds
top.
good.
All right. Hope you don't mind me taking this next one, and then I guess you can jump in afterwards. But again, my damn eyesight. So who have we got? We've got Kev Sav 85.
Yep.
Do we
I'll
know
ask.
Kev? Mhm.
No, I don't know Kev. Kev is I assume Kev is Kevin. Um, Let me have a quick look because I want to give him credit. Yep, it's Kevin. I'm not sure what Kevin's surname is, but it's Kevin. So I'm gonna say Savage, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe.
thanks for the pod. Love it. Have you tried Bicarb for longer races, and do you have any thoughts on it? Thanks a million for your question, Kevin.
Now, I haven't taken bicarb. It's one of the few things I haven't tried at all, but it's one thing that I am very keen to try. Um, but I can give you my thoughts on it. So bicarb does work. So essentially, it's doing something very similar to what beta alanine does, and that is preventing, or it's buffering the buildup of kind of waste products in the muscle to prevent that kind of burning when you're running. Now, it's so bicarbonate of soda, most people know it as like baking powder, what you put into your cakes and stuff. And just to be very clear, if you try and take that in its raw form, you're going to get very bad stomach distress, because it's alkaline, isn't it? So it's basically going to react with the acidity in your stomach, and you're going to have a very, very bad time. So the one thing I'd say about, I think, look, I would like to try bicarb. It's the research around it has been very positive, but the downside is most forms it come in, like I've just alluded to, give you kind of stomach distress. And as someone who has quite a sensitive stomach, I hear the only way to take, or the best way to take it, is the Morton product, whereby they have it kind of encapsulated in a hydrogel. So it goes, they're little bubbles of bicarb, and it gets transported into the stomach. And once it's there, this outer kind of liquidy layer dissolves, and it's there ready to go. So it skips the digestive process, and you don't have any stomach upset. The downside to this Morton product is that it's hugely, hugely expensive. Like, I'm talking outrageous. I don't have a number off my head, but for recreational runners, it's just something that the juice is not worth the squeeze, because especially for over longer races, I think it's more effective over things like 5Ks, maybe 10Ks, where you're kind of building up that lactate a little bit quicker, and the acidity in the muscles, which is what bicarb is preventing against, is that much greater. It's just not worth it, because you might kind of get a few seconds off your time. Or if you're someone that can afford to take it in training, you might find that it allows you to get better quality training over time, because you're able to run maybe higher volumes at certain paces, or you're able to maybe pick up the pace for a lower or the same relative intensity that you normally would. But yeah, the only downside is it's very expensive in this form. But otherwise, look, if you want to try and find a different product and see if it works for you, just keep it well away from any races. Like, practice it well beforehand, because you don't want to be getting to a race. And I think the common symptom is that people shit themselves. So yeah, just be aware of that. So yeah,
Yeah, you
have you
absolutely
tried
don't want that. Yeah, I
bicarb?
actually have. I haven't used the Morton because, like you say, it is silly expensive. There's a great company here in based in England actually, who are they're now called Flycarb, but I think when they released they were called just Bicarb with two R's in the carb part. So they have made their thing. I've just popped onto their Instagram page just to see what their kind of message is. Flycarb makes high performance nutrition accessible or affordable bicarb supplement, buffers lactic acid, sorry, should I say. Um, Helping athletes break boundaries. So I have tried their product. It's a hell of a lot cheaper and more accessible than the Morton stuff. And like you say, I think it's more beneficial for middle distance athletes, 800 meter, 1500 meter, 3K, 5K, maybe even 10K. I trialed it in training a couple of times just to check, like, was there any um, distress, on the gut? And thankfully there wasn't. It was absolutely fine. I think I've got a pretty strong stomach. But, these things, you're never going to notice a difference. You're never just going to say, like, my goodness, I felt amazing today. So don't expect that. You won't get that. Good training, good nutrition, good sleep. They're your low hanging fruit. That's going to really help move the needle on your performance. But yeah, there's some great research around bicarb, and it's how effective it can be. Will I take it in a race? I don't think so. I'm a long distance runner. I like to run half marathons and marathons. Yeah, I'm not gonna take it before my race this weekend. I'm not gonna take it before London Marathon. I purchased some out of my own interest and trialed it in some training sessions, including a pretty hard track session one day where I was running quite a bit faster. I didn't notice any difference, to be honest, in terms of my performance. But again, even if you do notice a difference in your performance, it's impossible to point the finger at the bicarb because maybe you've had a brilliant sleep that evening. Maybe you're just in a really well recovered state. Maybe your food has been dialed in and you've got loads of carbs in the system and you're just operating at a really high level for you that day, you know. So it's one of these things. It's really difficult to measure its effectiveness in the individual. If you want to try it, by all means. But this guy, Kevin, has asked for longer races, and I think its effectiveness in long distance racing, particularly, like I say, half marathons and marathons, yeah, there's probably no real benefit. So, like you say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Probably not. Save your money. Buy some more carbohydrates, and yeah, maybe go for a nice meal after your race instead and treat yourself.
Well, I would actually just add, if you want to experiment with something, and something that I do actually take is beta alanine. There's pretty good research around that in terms of loading it, not necessarily loading in terms of kind of having a big chunk at once, but slowly introducing that, having it daily, letting it kind of buffer your levels, and it does something quite similar. It's a lot cheaper. So yeah, maybe look into some of the research around beta alanine and make a decision there. Okay, I'm gonna ask you one, and this is from Jervy Q. Do we know
Jervis
Jervy?
Quinn. Yeah, it's Jervis
Jervis,
Quinn.
hello. Okay, so I'm going to say have we ever thought about a training camp at altitudes such as Kenya or France?
Yes, I have
Yes.
thought about
End
it
of
and
question.
dreamt about it many times. It's on
Yep.
my bucket list. I would love nothing more than to head out to. I'd love to go to the Alps. I'd love to go to Kenya. I'd love to head out and just immerse myself in that running culture, and just train for a couple of weeks like an elite athlete. So yes, I've thought about it many times. I haven't done it. But I would absolutely love to. I think it would be amazing, just amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, and
What
I
about you?
just, I've just second that. I'd absolutely love to, and even go to the length that I looked up. There's one place in Australia that has an altitude training camp, and it's here in Victoria where I live. It's a little bit of a while away, and it's not that high. I think it's like just high enough to warrant being an altitude.
Is that Falls
Um,
Creek?
it is Falls Creek. Yeah, correct. Very good. But yeah, look, I have a job, I have a partner, and I have offspring, so I can't just up and leave for like 3-4 weeks, which is realistically what you'd need to do if you want to get the benefits. So look, we've thought about it, but unfortunately, we're not professional athletes, so I can't see it happening anytime soon.
Just another, yeah, you're right. Just another note on that though. You mentioned about the benefits of altitude, and you're absolutely right. 3 to 4 weeks to get the full benefit of kind of the increased altitude and to get the kind of the physiological adaptations. You're right, and there's kind of two schools of thought around altitude. A lot of people like to train high, sorry, live high and train low, which
Train
means they
low.
live at altitude and then they travel down to at lower altitude to train each day. And there's other athletes that like to both live and train at the high altitude. It's different schools of thought depending on kind of the individual and the coach and so on. But what I was going to say is I would even happily go to somewhere like Font Romeu in the Alps for a 1 week or a 10-day stint, simply for not necessarily the full physiological adaptations, but more so just for the experience. I think a lot of people forget about the experience of altitude and how just going to these places could be just a really cool experience, and what that could then do for motivation and excitement and enjoyment of the sport for potentially years to come. Let's say you go to Kenya for a fortnight. Yes, you might not get the full altitude adaptations, but that experience is bound to give you so much, just good feelings around running, and just watching what others are doing and immersing yourself in that culture is really what I would like to do. Because at the end of the day, there's also an acclimatization period. It does take about a week to 10 days to acclimatize, so you can't really do sessions depending on how high you've gone up. But if you go to the Rift Valley, for example, in Kenya, you'd be very silly to do a hard training session within the first 7 to 10 days, regardless of how you feel, because ultimately that's going to come back to bite you. So you might only get if you're out there for a fortnight, 4 or 5 days of proper training, you can probably only do 1 to 2 sort of high quality or longer sessions within that period. So it's not necessarily for the training or the adaptations, but more so, I believe, for that like fully immersed experience that would just, it would be amazing, mate. I'm smiling thinking about it.
Maybe one day for both of us. Maybe
Maybe
we'll
one
go
day.
together one day. Meet
That
in the
would be cool.
middle.
That would
That
be
would
cool.
be cool. All right. What have we got next? Do you wanna do the next one for me?
Yep, sounds good, mate. Denise Ward's question. When you strength train and run on the same day, what do you do first and why? That's a great question.
Very good question. And I'm going to give you two answers. And for me, well, because there's 2 days a week where I do both on the same day. And ultimately it depends on my schedule. So I think at the end of the day, don't stress it. The main thing that's important if you're going to do a resistance session on the same day as a run is you try and separate those two things as wide as you can, ideally. So I'm talking best case scenario, if you can do 6 to 8 hours between those two sessions, fantastic. And that includes making sure you eat and have plenty of carbs like immediately after whatever you do first. That's kind of my, in terms of my hierarchy, that's at the bottom. That's the big one. But in terms of if I had like a free day and I had a choice as to what I did first, I would always go with whatever my priority was for that day. So at the moment, obviously, um, my priority is running. So I'd always try and get that run in first because that's where you're going to be expending the most of your energy and you're going to be freshest. So regardless of whether that's an easy run or ideally you probably wouldn't want to do a workout on the same day as a resistance session, but if you did, you'd definitely do that running workout first. Like I said, give it kind of 6 to 8 hours and then come back and do your resistance training session. And I should clarify that upper body probably matters less so. But if you're doing legs like I do, then definitely kind of give it longer, do legs second, and make sure you eat immediately after that run. But look, at the end of the day, if it's a case of kind of being 4 hours, maybe even like 3 hours, which I've had to do before, it's fine. It just becomes more important that you are listening to your body in terms of how hard you're pushing in that resistance session, and then paying extra attention to food because you're going to need to replenish as soon as possible, if not during the run.
Great stuff. Yep. I think I'm happy just to leave it at that one. That's a great answer, Luke. Nicely done.
There you go. Done. All right. I'm going to give this one to you because I haven't actually listened to the podcast. So this is from Hybrid Hall.
Yep.
Um,
Tory Hall.
Tori Hall, hello. So, thoughts on the Diary of a CEO podcast about running, etc., with Dr. Vonda Wright. Now, I haven't listened to this, so I can't say anything, but yeah,
Yeah, me either, mate. Unfortunately, I haven't listened to this podcast. I don't listen to the Diary of a CEO. It's not one of the podcasts that I indulge in. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't answer that one. But what I will do is I'll try figure out what was said about running on said podcast, and maybe we'll answer it on another podcast, or I'll drop Tori a message.
there you go. Apologies for that one. So, all right, you
Yeah,
can have the
sorry, we
next
don't
one
we
as
don't
well.
script we don't script this.
Yeah, this is raw dogging.
Yeah.
So, this is from Paul Runs 19. Do we know Paul?
Yep, I've been messaging Paul quite a bit back and forward over the last while, just
Fantastic.
running talk. So, yeah, we'll ask.
Awesome.
I'll ask you this one, or vice versa.
I can ask you because you didn't really have
Cool.
the last one. So,
Yep.
so Paul's asking, how do I get sub 16 5K and sub 35 10K, and any race workouts you would recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends. No, I'm just joking. First thing I would say is it's great to have these time goals, but sometimes you can set a bit of a limit on yourself when you just focus on times. What I would say is if you have a coach, they should be profiling you to some degree. And what I mean by that is that coach should be looking at what your weaknesses are and working on those weaknesses. If you don't have a coach, try to figure that out for yourself. So work out based on your training and racing and maybe other race performances where your weaknesses lie. And, is it like an aerobic issue? Um, is it like biomechanics and speed? Are you just not efficient enough? at those kind of faster race speeds. Generally, it's not that, because we progress, up until you get to a certain level. It doesn't tend to be governed by what I would call, in my experience anyway, your race performance doesn't tend to be governed by efficiency. It more depends to be governed by fitness. Um, what I would say is, if you can really look to do specific work to target specific elements of your physiology when you train, so be quite intentional about what you're training on a given day, whether it's a lactate threshold session, be really intentional that you actually train your lactate threshold and you don't go at an intensity that's much too high, because ultimately the further that you can push that lactate threshold towards your VO2, aka the faster that you can run in a controlled state, is gonna mean much faster racing. And you can do that in a whole host of ways, by doing threshold intervals. You can do extended tempo runs. To say, is there any race workouts that you would recommend? I think Paul's looking for some specific sessions, like as in sessions that are going to really get him ready to run 5K. If it's a 5K, a specific session could be 5x1K at target race effort or race pace. You want to be careful with that session though. It's in the middle of a training block or training week and done on your own without the adrenaline of a race. It's actually quite a difficult session depending on your level. And what I would say is give yourself a good amount of recovery between reps. I have seen athletes do I'm not a massive fan of quote unquote race specific sessions, or sessions that kind of give you like people would call them indicator sessions, where you do a session and it's like, right, I'm ready to run a time. I'm not really a fan of that. I prefer to just layer the training, taper and freshen up, and then express the fitness and just see where I'm at on race day, as opposed to doing these indicator sessions. But if you are doing something like 5x K at race pace, or 12x400 meters at maybe 5K pace or slightly faster, which is a global volume in those sessions of 5K, be careful with the recovery. You want to take quite a good recovery. And what I was just going to say is, I've seen athletes do this type of session, like for example 5x K, where they decrease the recovery as the session progresses. So they might take like 3 to 4 minutes after the first rep, and after the second rep they're always taking a minute less until they get to maybe the last two efforts, where they might only take 30 or 40 seconds rest. So the intensity builds just like it would during a race, and so you're kind of replicating not necessarily the full demand of the race, but you're getting up there in terms of the intensity towards the end of the session. So that's a good one. But my advice is just layer some really high quality training, be intentional with the purpose of your sessions, and make sure that you kind of stick to the purpose of the sessions when you do those training sessions. Freshen up, try to peak on the day of your race, and just express the fitness that you've built and smash the barrier that you've set. Why not run 34:10 instead of 34:59? Is kind of the way I would look at it, because you can progress at a really good rate up until a point. There always comes a point for every athlete where there's that the point where gains become very incremental and much harder to find. So up until that point, it's like ride the wave. Just keep making. If you train properly and you recover properly and you race well, you can take massive chunks out of your time. So I hope that answers that question. As I say, I'm not a massive fan of really race specific sessions or indicator sessions.
No, I typically agree. I have less experience than you, Adam, but it rings pretty true what you're saying as well, just about layering training. So I'm happy to leave that one now. I think that's pretty thorough. Now, look, we are kind of
Sorry, I
slowly.
should just mention as well. Look, just cover all bases in your training.
Yep.
Understand what's required to run well over 10K or 5K, and cover all of your bases. There are a host of skills that you need to have to run well over 5K and 10K, and make sure that you're training all of those skills and not leaving one of them out. Typically athletes leave out the type of training or something that they don't particularly like, or a weakness. I would say double down on that. Would be my last piece of advice. Sorry, Luke.
No, it's fantastic. Now, what I was going to say is I think it's pretty clear we're not going to get through all of these questions in as much detail as we like, but I think let's do Ellie's question as one last full question, and maybe we'll have time for a couple of quick fires to round things off. And look, if we didn't get to your question, we are very sorry, but we will come back to it. We'll have to do another episode. So we haven't forgot about you. We have seen you. So, Yeah. Do you wanna take the next one, or do you want me to?
No, I'll shout it out. So Ellie Ruddy has asked, how useful is a double training day?
It depends, and we'll see you next week. No, yeah. Look, I think if look, it really does depend. It depends on what kind of what do you mean by a double training day? So for me, a double training day is getting a resistance session alongside a run to make sure I fit everything in. But I think in terms of what Adam is doing, it's a tool for getting in more volume without necessarily doing like losing a rest day and then prolonging or elongating your time spent under stress. So in a lot of cases, when you're trying to get really high mileage, or relatively high mileage, and you just don't have the time to do it in one run, or that run would end up being like 2 hours potentially long. That's where splitting it up into two, like an AM and a PM session, is probably a good idea. The caveat to that is you're probably better off waiting until you're quite an experienced runner who has a lot of time spent doing high mileage, because if you suddenly go, okay, I've seen Adam do, like if it was me, for instance, I'm doing 80K weeks. And if all of a sudden I went, oh, Adam's doing double runs, I should just like add an extra 40 minutes onto or do a morning session that's an hour, then another 40-minute session. That kind of drastic ramp up in mileage and that time that I'd normally spent recovering, that's going to potentially do me more, or very likely do me more harm than good. So it really depends on your training status, on how long you've been training and how much volume you've been doing, as to whether that session is useful. And obviously you might have heard us talk about the kind of the Norwegian method, and they have been known to do an LT1 session in the morning and an LT2 session in the evening. And again, that comes down to wanting to compress that stimulus, or that stress, I should say, into one day, so they still have as many of those easier, or days that are easier to recover from, and not kind of stressing themselves out on too many days. So again, it depends, but maybe just have a think about those factors before you go and add in a double training day.
Yeah, brilliant answer, Luke. Brilliant. I don't think I even need to add. I don't think I want to add anything to that. That's a great answer.
Awesome. Should we do some rapid fires to kind of get through as many of these as we can?
Yep, absolutely, mate. Do you want to take it away?
All right. So for you, Adam, do you take anything to stop cramps? No. Uh, Another test of that, just kind of stay hydrated, maybe do some resistance training, and typically that's going to sort you out. The only thing I'd say is cramps are quite genetic. So yeah, there's not always much you can do, but just hydration, plenty of sodium, and maybe do some resistance training to help with that one as well.
Great stuff.
I've got a really good one for you. And sorry, that was from Ois McGee. I think that's
Yeah,
right.
O'Sheen McGee.
Oh,
O'Sheen McGee.
sorry, guys. I'm just reading an Instagram handle. This one is from Nick Weston, and I love this question. So, running shorts, loose splits, or skinny fits?
What are skinny fits? Like half tights?
Tight. I presume tights. Yeah, half tights.
I like both, mate. You'll know that the bum cheek was on show in the last race. I'm gonna wear the half tights this weekend, so I like both.
I'd agree. I wear kind of my UVU half tights and my Nike half tights for the majority, but sometimes if I'm jumping on that treadmill, I love the split shorts and showing a bit of cheek as well. Um,
Good stuff. I'll take the next one.
all right, go.
Good stuff. Peter Donnelly has asked, what are both of your running goal aspirations?
A quick answer, and this is something that, believe it or not, I spoke to my coach David about on my kind of discovery initial consultation call. And I said, David, I'm 30. I reckon I've got 10 years to be at my best. I want you to take me as close to being an elite runner as I can get to. And that is my aspiration. I want to get as close. I want to get to my peak and say, I gave it everything. I got as close to being a professional runner that I could be. And that's my biggest
Yeah,
goal.
mine's exactly the same. To run as fast as I can. It's as simple as that.
Mhm.
To
Awesome.
get
All
as
right.
close to my physical potential as I possibly can. That's my aspiration.
Fantastic. There you go. All right. This one is for you. So, Big Scrambled Legs, great name,
That's Mark.
asks, Mark, hello, Mark. So, are phantom pains the night before a race a thing, or is it just me?
They are a thing.
They are a thing.
They are a
It
thing. Yep.
happens.
Done. Best way to taper for running your first marathon from Nicholas Trial.
Oh
Is there a
man,
quick
this
fire
is
answer
one
to that?
I'd look. Yes, the quick fire answer is there is no best way, and it really depends on the individual. I think this one, and I know we missed one from Killian Lennon as well. I think those ones we should wait and do them, give them a proper answer, just so we can go
Yeah.
into it in more detail. So we see you
I would
both.
say
We'll come back to you.
do what you need to do to freshen up and feel great on race day. There is, of course, a really in-depth answer there, but the quickfire answer is do what you need to do to freshen up and feel fantastic on the start line of your race.
I love it. All right.
Um,
And
Sarah has asked, is it time to invest in a Garmin watch, Fitbit, Apple Watch? I've got my first half marathon in August. Good luck, Sarah.
I think I'm going to say yes, it probably is. And honestly, my quick advice: skip the Apple Watch, skip the smartwatch, go straight for a Garmin or even a Coros, because you're better off getting something that's specific to what you're doing, and that is what they're there for. They're there for like kind of sport specific stuff. So for me, it's got to be a Garmin. Like we both love the Forerunner, or I do hear good things about Coros as well, and it's a lot cheaper. So yeah.
Yeah, great answer.
All right. Nicholas Trowell, again, I see your question. We're going to come back to you in another episode because I can talk about that for a while. Jules Hughes, again, was asking about is it beneficial to stretch out your hamstrings or not? Again, I'm going to quickly say no, I don't think it is. I think you're probably better off strengthening your hamstrings because a stronger muscle is a more mobile and flexible muscle. So instead of spending time stretching, you're probably better off getting in the gym, doing things like obviously hamstring curls are pretty basic, but maybe some eccentric loading as well, some slider hamstring curls, even some kind of assisted Nordic curls. Really beneficial for sport specific stuff.
Just very quickly add, there is a great hamstring stretch. It's an assisted stretch and it's on the Hope on a Rope by Jared Hartman. And it's my favorite stretch of all time. And it said it uses the rope, you lie on your back. I would check out Hope on a Rope, Jules, and definitely do the hamstring, the assisted hamstring stretch. It's fantastic. So I actually personally do like to stretch my hamstrings. Not too much, but definitely when there's a little bit of tightness in there, I do like to stretch them.
There you go. All right, Jules also, I think we can give this one a quick couple of minutes, but Jules quickly asked as well, how do you deal with last minute injuries that mean you have to skip a race? Adam, why don't you take this away?
Number one word is gain some perspective, and that's like just learn to accept it and understand that there are far bigger problems in the world. That's the quick fire answer. Sorry that's really quick, and I feel like I'm actually talking quicker now.
No, that's we both are. We've actually sped up. You haven't adjusted your settings. We promise we're speaking quicker. And this one is actually for you. This is directed for you. This is from Barry McCarroll, and he
Yeah, good friend
asks,
of mine.
Adam, will you leave Kira for him?
Dear, dear, dear. That's a good friend of mine, Barry, that I run with a lot in town here. Barry's a legend, and someone that I actually really look up to as a runner. But sorry, mate, I can't leave my wife for you.
There you go.
Or for
Apologies for
anyone.
that. For anyone, unless it's me, of course. All right. So I'm just going to throw in one last question. So this was actually sent to my partner via WhatsApp, one of the ladies that my partner works with. And yeah, off the top of my head, the question was because a few months back, I posted that I was getting kind of bleeding toes and I was getting a few blisters on my toes with certain shoes. And they're asking any tips to prevent that, like socks. And my quick answer is invest in a pair of socks that are built for running. So where I was going wrong is I was wearing kind of basic cotton socks. And there's a lot of friction within those. Like it allows the toes to move around, and so I'd say invest in a good pair of socks. I love the Shoe SHYU training socks. I've had no issues whatsoever in those. And the second thing I'll say is correctly fitting shoes, so not getting shoes that are too big or too small. And again, if you're unsure, go try them on and have a run in them, and that's how you'll know if a shoe fits or not. And again, if you're worried, always go if you're between sizes, I should say, always go half up.
answer. Can I ask one more?
Yes, of course you can.
And you just need to give me one word for this one. Which do you prefer post race? And this is from Mark. Which do you prefer
I,
post race? Feed or beer? I love that question.
I did see this, and I'm going to give a boring answer because I don't drink and I haven't drank for a very long time. And I love food. It's feed, man. As soon as I finish a run, all I can think about is eating. So feed.
Both. It's got to be both for me.
There
Post
you go.
marathon, burger, chips, beer. It has to be both.
I have actually saying that I
And
stopped
then another
drinking
beer.
because and another bit. I stopped drinking because it was not good for me. Not that I didn't like it. So for after Ballarat, sorry, I actually have some non-alcoholic beers because I do love the taste of beer, and that's the closest I can get to it. So yeah,
Yeah. I don't do a massive amount of drinking myself. I do absolutely love a beer and love a glass of wine. Um, we would have the occasional glass of wine with our dinner. And when I'm in a big block like this, I don't do much drinking, but yeah, I love a couple of pints after a race. It's a great way to celebrate.
there you go. That's a great question. Thank you very much.
Get the
So
pints in.
get the pints in. Guys, I think we've been recording now for a little while. And again, really apologize if we didn't get around to your question in detail today, but we have made a note of the questions that we haven't answered yet, and we'll come back to them in a later episode. They'll be a priority for us. But look, guys, I think we'll leave that there. Again, apologies for kind of skipping the niceties today, but we just wanted to get through as many of these questions as we can. And thank you so much again for sending them our way. Really appreciate it. But look, that was episode 8. We are now 4 weeks away from our respective marathons, so you will have plenty to talk about next week in terms of training. We're even looking into potentially getting a few guests on in upcoming weeks, so maybe keep your eyes peeled for that. But in the meantime, be sure to follow, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It really means the world to us, and it's really helping us grow the podcast. So thank you so much, and we will see you all very, very soon. Take care.